Hello to everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to this important event. I'm really glad that you were able to make it, to be here with us, to discuss this very, very important topic. Special Ambassador for Cooperatives, Madame Elisabeth Atangana, Excellencies, Ministers, Heads of Delegation to the Committee on Food Security, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of FAO's Director-General, Mr. Graziano da Silva, I welcome you all to this side event on enabling agricultural cooperatives, a paradigm shift for economic and social inclusion. The Director-General sends his apologies for not being able to be here with us present in the room, but this is a topic of the highest importance for him, and he is following our deliberations. This side event is jointly organized by FAO and the Committee for the Promotion and Advancement of Cooperatives, COPAC. COPAC is a coordinating committee responsible for assisting the United Nations in planning and implementing the UN International Year of Cooperatives 2012. COPAC is made up of the cooperative movement and the United Nations and its agencies, with the International Cooperative Alliance, the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the International Labour Organization, the World Farmer Organization, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. This event is the only side event of the Committee on Food Security on the issue of cooperatives. And as you know, this is also the topic of the whole World Food Day, the whole World Food Day approach that takes place during a whole year. It is going side by side with the International Year of Cooperatives, and this comes from the recognition of the fundamental role that cooperatives play in advancing the issues of food security and of reducing rural poverty. FAO has been organizing numerous events throughout this year of cooperatives in order to raise awareness of the important role that cooperatives play in terms of agriculture and in terms of food production, feeding the planet, and indeed in terms of the future of the planet. We are the lead in terms, together with the Rome-based agencies, in terms of promoting the importance of agricultural cooperatives, because of course the Year of Cooperatives is about all kinds of different cooperatives, but we are the lead in promoting the role of agricultural cooperatives in relation to reaching the goals, world goals of reducing hunger and poverty. Cooperatives, of course, are a key partner for us in order to achieve our mission. I think you may be aware of the changes that FAO is having. We're moving towards a much more focused strategic framework. From 11 strategic objectives, we're moving to 5 strategic objectives, all of them multidisciplinary, and in every single one of them, cooperatives and producer organizations are key to be able to achieve them. Therefore, for us, cooperatives are one of our foremost key partners. Agricultural cooperatives and producer organizations are a driving force of the economy, creating jobs and ultimately reducing hunger and poverty. In order to be able to perform this role, they need to be empowered and supported. However, what is often lacking is a set of conditions that enable agricultural and food cooperatives to form, develop, and to thrive. And this is the reason why our discussion today is so very important and is so timely. Yesterday, for those of you who were there during the World Food Day celebration, we clearly heard at the highest level from the Rome-based agencies, from our partners, from different governments, how central cooperatives are in order to reach our mandate. And they also called for new actions in order to, and new recognition of cooperatives for the future of the world. During the International Day of Cooperatives, last 7 of July, our Director-General in FAO inaugurated a liaison office space dedicated to cooperatives and producer organizations. And in so doing, he has demonstrated his will to open the doors of FAO to our main partners, including cooperatives and producer organizations. FAO is committed to bringing to the fore the policy-making fora, such as the CFS, the need to strengthen all forms of collective social and economic action of agricultural small producers, including cooperatives and producer organizations. The Committee on World Food Security is the policy forum that should recognize the contributions of agricultural cooperatives for food security and nutrition. The CFS is an innovative participatory policy-making forum where discussions and negotiations with stakeholders from both the public and private spheres take place. It has been very successful, including in a major achievement such as the agreement on the voluntary guidelines on responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries and forests in the context of national food security. The International Year of Cooperatives 2012 is not an end in itself. FAO is committed to reinvigorating its efforts to strengthen cooperatives. Together with its partners, producer organizations, civil society, private sector and other stakeholders, FAO and its members, in close collaboration with COPAC, will continue to build on the momentum created by the International Year of Cooperatives. Let us build on the energy from our event today and identify new grounds on how FAO, together with COPAC, can develop a forward-looking international plan of action on cooperatives for 2012 and, of course, and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention. I have a message from Danielle Abbas, who unfortunately could not come here today and be with us at this important gathering, but it was difficult for her to come from New York. She's the director of the Division for Social Policy and Development. And we have been collaborating very, very closely with DESA for all of our work on cooperatives. And she sends the following message, which I will proceed to read. Distinguished delegates and representatives, greetings and good afternoon. As you gather today on the occasion of this 39th session of the Committee on World Food Security held during the United Nations International Year of Cooperatives, it is fitting that the theme of your session speaks of a paradigm shift for economic and social inclusion. Indeed, this encapsulates the demand and drive for an approach to business that can balance the pursuit of profit with emphasis on social values of equity, dignity, and people-driven decision-making. Agricultural cooperatives exemplify this move towards more inclusive and participatory enterprise. By mobilizing communities and fostering self-help, they enable producers to attain economies of scale and levels of productivity that improve viability over the long term. And in buttressing members against shocks and crises, these cooperatives can help safeguard livelihoods during times of trouble. All of these aspects consolidate people's stakes in society, thereby anchoring them in the community. Agricultural cooperatives thus contribute as well to social stability. Furthermore, within this event's broader context of food security, agricultural cooperatives can coordinate production and procurement to ensure that communities retain consistent access to the food sources that they depend on. In so doing, they contribute to the eradication of hunger, as expressed in the theme of this year's World Food Day, Agricultural Cooperatives, Key to Feeding the World. There is now greater awareness of these cooperatives' advantages, so this is the opportune moment for pressing ahead with creative initiatives and innovations. Now is also the time for a bold new vision on what governments and stakeholders can do to create an enabling environment in which cooperatives can form and flourish. In closing, I hope that your session will prove stimulating, insightful, and inspiring. Thank you, and please enjoy your time in Rome. This is the message from Danielle Abbas. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Yves Crowley, who is the Acting Director of the Division for Gender, Equity, and Rural Employment here in FAO. Before giving the floor to her, I have an announcement to make. Please join us in a lunch that will be served right after the side event, which is approximately around 2 o'clock, in the D Lounge. Now, I cannot even think about explaining how you can get to the D Lounge because you will be lost in the maze of FAO, but you only hang on to us, we will be leading, and you can just follow. Otherwise, you'll never get there. But there is lunch. We hope to see all of you there. Without further announcements, let me just give the floor to Yves Crowley.
Thank you, and welcome to all of you today. We're going to run this event a little bit differently than some of the events you've heard so far. Although we'll start off in a slightly more traditional way with people in the podium giving very short insights into how cooperatives are working in their different countries and from their different perspectives. But after that, we're going to have a little bit of a debate, and I'm going to also call on people in the audience and ask questions. Don't worry, those of you who know me are probably the ones that are more likely to get called on, because I have a little bit of an idea of who you are, but you never know. So just be prepared. And also, as you're listening to this session, please think about the kinds of questions you want to ask, because we do want this to be interactive. For those of you who don't know, we do have simultaneous interpretation, English, French, so please put on your earphones if you want to be able to understand all of the presentations we're going to have. And we're going to start off by a set of best practices on an enabling environment. There'll be one from France and one from Kenya, and then a short 5-minute video that will be describing a business model approach that comes from FAO. So that's the quick overview from the beginning before we actually initiate the discussion. Also, before we start, I just wanted to make sure that you all have seen the information that was available that gives you an outline of who each of these presenters are. Now, since that material is available, I'm not going to read out who they are in detail. I'm just going to give a quick summary, but as I introduce them. But I really would strongly welcome all of you to take a look at that, because these are people with a very rich experience. So, with that, I'd like to begin by introducing our first speaker. This is Barbara Mauvilain-Guillot. She's from Coop de France, External Relations. She's in charge of Coop de France, External Relations, and she's also coordinator and editor of the Manifesto Cooperative Revolution, the white paper on French agricultural cooperatives, which was elaborated for the French presidential elections of 2012. So with that, I'd like to just call on Barbara to begin her presentation, and she does have some PowerPoint slides. It's 5 to 8 minutes, and if they get over, I'm going to wave the flag.
Bonjour à tous, merci d'accueillir COP de France aujourd'hui. Donc je m'exprime au nom de COP de France, qui est le syndicat unifié des entreprises coopératives agricoles en France. Donc unifié au niveau des différentes branches d'activité et au niveau des différentes régions françaises. Alors, quelques chiffres clés pour la coopération agricole française. Ce sont 2900 entreprises coopératives, également 13 400 CUMA, et tout cela représente 82,8 milliards d'euros de chiffre d'affaires. Donc, globalement, les coopératives agricoles pèsent pour 40% de l'agroalimentaire français et pour 160 000 salariés. Alors, ce qui caractérise les coopératives agricoles françaises, ce sont leur diversité. On trouve à la fois des petites coopératives TPE et PME, et à la fois des très grands groupes coopératifs qui sont à l'international, à l'export, avec plusieurs milliards d'euros de chiffre d'affaires. Nous trouvons également à la fois des coopératives sectorielles spécialisées, céréales ou viticoles, et de plus en plus des coopératives polyvalentes qui donc allient différents métiers au sein de leurs entreprises. Alors cette diversité constitue un véritable poids économique et social. La coopération agricole est leader dans de nombreuses filières. Je vous en ai cité quelques-unes comme les céréales, les oléagineux, le sucre. Ce qu'il faut retenir, c'est que les coopératives agricoles sont parmi les principaux employeurs de leur région, et y compris en zone difficile. Je citerai l'exemple de la collecte du lait qui est assurée par les coopératives agricoles, y compris en zone de montagne. Alors, je vous ai mis un petit rappel juridique et de principe sur quels sont les 4 piliers d'une coopérative agricole. Donc la coopération agricole repose à la fois sur la loi de 1947 qui concerne toutes les coopératives agricoles, tous secteurs confondus, et à la fois sur des dispositions qui figurent dans le Code rural français. Alors les 4 piliers sont bien sûr la démocratie, le principe un homme, une voix, ce sont des sociétés de personnes et non de capitaux. Le territoire, les coopératives agricoles françaises agissent sur un territoire défini obligatoirement dans leur statut. 3e pilier, le double engagement. Les agriculteurs souscrivent à la fois au capital et à la fois ils fournissent leur production en tout ou partie à leur coopérative. Et dernier point essentiel, la capitalisme. Donc je l'ai dit, ce sont des sociétés de personnes qui fonctionne selon le versement d'un intérêt limité au capital, puisque l'idée, c'est l'idée du long terme, de pérenniser l'entreprise et de la transmettre aux générations suivantes. Alors, la gouvernance des coopératives agricoles se décompose sur des instances de décision interne, au cœur duquel se trouve bien sûr l'Assemblée générale et le conseil d'administration. Mais également, on va avoir un certain nombre de contrôles externes qui ont été mis en place par les pouvoirs publics. Et donc, j'insiste, le statut des sociétés coopératives agricoles a été fortement structuré par un certain nombre de dispositions juridiques mises en place par le gouvernement. Donc, on a le contrôle légal des comptes, la révision coopérative et un haut conseil de la coopération agricole qui est là pour donner un agrément aux coopératives et valider si elles agissent conformément à leur statut. Alors aujourd'hui, cette gouvernance est en jeu parce que le monde économique et le monde agricole a beaucoup évolué. Les questions agricoles agroalimentaires sont de plus en plus complexes. Les agriculteurs évoluent dans des marchés ouverts, sont moins protégés qu'auparavant. Et donc l'un des enjeux importants, ce sont la formation des administrateurs, qui sont des agriculteurs donc élus et sociétaires de leur coopérative, le fonctionnement du binôme président-directeur, c'est-à-dire un peu le lien entre l'élaboration de sa stratégie et sa mise en œuvre. Enfin, le dernier enjeu, c'est un petit peu l'attractivité des coopératives, leur diversité vis-à-vis notamment des plus jeunes, que ce soit des jeunes agriculteurs ou des jeunes salariés, également des femmes. Donc là, il y a un certain nombre d'actions qui se développent vis-à-vis des jeunes dans les coopératives agricoles pour rester attractifs. Alors là, je vous ai mis rapidement quelques items de parole de coopérateurs qui sont issus d'une enquête faite par COP de France auprès d'un échantillon de coopérateurs. Et on leur a demandé pourquoi êtes-vous coopérateurs aujourd'hui au XXIe siècle. Et donc les réponses, nous avons classé les réponses les plus courantes qui ont été données. C'est assez intéressant. Donc vous voyez qu'on a la performance économique, la solution sur l'exploitation, le fait d'être copropriétaire de l'entreprise, la démocratie et l'engagement, faire vivre nos régions et investir pour nos enfants. Alors, les coopératives agricoles françaises ont beaucoup évolué. Elles ont développé des marques coopératives qui sont aujourd'hui très connues et qui, face à des produits mondialisés, affirment avec force une provenance, un ancrage régional, un savoir-faire traditionnel. Donc, il y a des marques que peut-être certains connaissent, comme, je sais pas, Paysans Bretons ou Grand Lait de Candia. Mais donc, je vous ai mis ça pour vous faire voir la diversité, la force économique et aussi la diversité, parce que certaines marques sont aussi issues de toutes petites coopératives, mais ont réussi à se faire reconnaître. Alors là, je vous ai mis le top 20 des groupes coopératifs français. Vous voyez que le premier groupe coopératif pèse pour plus de 6 milliards d'euros de chiffre d'affaires. Donc c'est très important. Mais en fait, si on compare avec les groupes coopératifs européens, on se rend compte que les groupes coopératifs français sont plutôt dans la moyenne, puisqu'en fait, au nord de l'Europe, il y a eu un mouvement de concentration des coopératives agricoles très importante. Et en France, je dirais qu'on a conservé une diversité plus grande du tissu économique coopératif. Alors, les principaux défis pour les coopératives, j'en ai cité 3. La performance économique, il y a une concurrence accrue, je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, il y a de moins en moins de régulation publique. Donc comment organiser le pouvoir économique des agriculteurs dans ce contexte? La gouvernance, donc je l'ai cité, j'y reviens pas. Et je voudrais insister sur le développement durable. Les coopératives doivent aujourd'hui porter une vision globale de l'entreprise, protection et valorisation des ressources, progrès social et compétitivité économique. Alors en conclusion, la coopération a été en France un puissant vecteur de modernisation, d'organisation, d'acquisition de la valeur, tout en laissant les clés des décisions aux agriculteurs eux-mêmes. Et dans un univers économique ouvert, concurrentiel, volatile, je rajouterais spéculatif, le modèle coopératif, on le voit, est en progression et il constitue aujourd'hui un véritable atout pour les agriculteurs et pour un développement durable. Voilà, donc la présentation, je crois, sera en ligne sur le site internet de la FAO, vous pourrez la retrouver.
So what we've heard is a really very different picture of what cooperatives are today than the picture that some people have in mind about cooperatives of the past. And this is probably going to be one of our recurrent themes. Before I introduce the next speaker, let me just mention that there is a list for participants to sign up on, and we hope that you will sign. And I'm just noting that we have the strange circumstance of being an all-female panel here. Don't know what that means, but it must be, do women cooperate more? I don't know. We have to be careful about generalizations, but it is interesting to note because I think this may be one of the only panels so far in CFS where this is the case. Okay, with that, I'd like to introduce the second speaker. This is Her Excellency Josephine Gaita from Kenya. She has been working in the civil service of Kenya for over 20 years, beginning in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And now, since 2011, she's been the ambassador for Kenya to Italy, Turkey, Cyprus, Poland, Greece, Malta, and the permanent representation of the Rome-based UN agencies. So, big title and a lot of background there. More on her cooperatives in her country are available. So I'd like to turn over the floor to Her Excellency Josephine Gaita.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. I don't have a presentation, so I'll just give you the history of cooperative movement in Kenya. As you all know, cooperatives are member-owned and member-controlled organizations whose main objective is to enhance the economic and social welfare of members. The cooperative movement in Kenya plays an important role in wealth creation, food security, and employment generation, and thus it contributes in poverty alleviation. Cooperatives have created employment in rural areas, and mostly in the area of non-skilled and skilled workers who are employed in many types of cooperatives. In Kenya, cooperatives cut across all sectors of the economy. They are found in agriculture, livestock, fisheries, finance, housing, handcrafts, transport, among others. They have given the Kenyan people an opportunity to participate in economic activities and hence integrated them in the global economic mainstream. At the institutional level, there are over 320,000 employees charged with the responsibility of running cooperative enterprises. Further, the sector has indirectly generated 1.5 million jobs in the small-scale enterprises and informal sectors through the provision of credit for investment. Its potential to create both direct and indirect employment through savings, mobilization, and investment is huge, considering that cooperatives function in all sectors of the economy. Its multiplier effect is greatest, especially in secondary chains of agricultural processing, investment ventures, through loans from SACCO, these are the savings and credit cooperatives, housing and acquisition of property. This is largely due to the governance reforms introduced by the government in 2004. The country has witnessed a resurgence of cooperative growth. Kenya's cooperative movement has made tremendous contributions towards economic growth and employment. With 14,286 registered cooperative societies and a registered membership of over 10 million, the cooperative movement has mobilized over 250 billion Kenya shillings in savings and deposits by last year, which is actually about 31% of the national savings. Of the registered cooperatives, 46% are actually based in agricultural sector, dealing with the various commodities. And these cooperatives play an important role in production and marketing of the most of the commodities. The main activities, as I mentioned, includes coffee, tea, dairy production, mostly by the cooperative societies, transport. In Kenya, we have got SACCOs that have enabled some of our Kenyans to own transport vehicles, which we call matatus in Kenya. They are also involved in housing. 25% of national housing requirements are provided by the cooperatives, either directly or through cooperative-provided loans. Again, cooperatives now are also in the forefront of setting up the mega cities that are coming up in Kenya. They are also involved in finance, in fishing. Now we have both private cooperatives that are handling the fishing sector. They are also dealing in farm purchases. If many of you remember, cooperatives movements were engaged in settlement of people in the early 1960s when people bought the white settlers' farms and allocated them to the Kenyans. Now we also have cooperatives involved in handcraft, both private and public. And then they are also involved in the farm input supply. They buy them for their members. And of late, the cooperatives are also involved in the manufacturing. What happened in Kenya for this movement? There was policy change in this change from 2004. Since the 1970s and 80s, the performance of the cooperatives was very critical, as I said, in the purchasing of farms, and it reached the peak in the early 90s. For instance, fish, cotton, pyrethrum, dairy and cotton and coffee cooperatives controlled between 40% and 90% of the produce marketed in the country. Initially, the agriculture marketing cooperatives marketed their produce through various state-controlled marketing boards, such as the National Cereals and Produce Board, Cotton Lint and Seed Marketing Board, Pyrethrum Board of Kenya, and Coffee Board of Kenya, which enjoyed exclusive trade monopolies. Equally, cooperatives enjoyed marketing monopolies in areas where they dominated the particular produce. There was, however, a drastic shift in policy globally from a largely state-controlled economy to an open market in the 1990s. You all remember during the structural adjustment policies that were introduced, and many of the cooperatives went down. So during this time, there was the change during this transition led to the collapse of many of the cooperatives because cooperatives had not prepared themselves to shoulder marketing responsibilities when the economy was liberalized. The percentage market share of cooperatives, mainly in agriculture, drastically reduced during this time. Despite the challenges, liberalization also ushered in opportunities for cooperatives. However, only a few cooperatives have used their comparative advantage to enter into the market, both locally and internationally, with value-added products such as milk and rice. In recognition of the critical role played by the sector, other national policies have been formulated which are favorable for cooperatives to thrive. The dairy industry is a source of livelihood for over 500,000 small-scale cooperative members. With the performance near collapse of the KCC Limited, milk marketed through formal channels declined from 1.2 million to 600,000 litres daily in 2002. However, with the revival of the new Kenya cooperative creameries, the dairy intake improved and now stands at 1.2 million litres per day. Nevertheless, the dairy cooperative societies have not fully recovered from the ramification of the rapid liberalization undertaken in the 1990s. Many of them have lost their competitiveness due to milk wastage during transportation for lack of efficient road network and milk coolers. The adverse effects of liberalization led to, at times, importation of cheap dairy products, thus intensifying competition to the local producers. Some of the broader opportunities available to revive the dairy industry are the existence now of a healthy macroeconomic environment and expansive regional market opportunities, including the Middle East, Southern Africa, the East African, and also the commercial blocs. Coffee is one of the key crops in the agriculture sector. It is Kenya's fourth leading foreign exchange earner, after tourism, horticulture, and tea. The coffee industry in Kenya is noted for its comparative system of milling, marketing, and auctioning coffee for its high percentage of production.
You need to talk slower for the translators.
Sorry. Majority of the smallholders coffee producers are organized into cooperative societies which assist them to communally process and ultimately market their coffee.
Slower stuff.
Today, we have about 450 coffee cooperatives in the country, with 996 coffee pulping factories, majority of which are single factory societies. Over the years, coffee has been marketed through auction, which was introduced in the country in 1935. In order to address the weaknesses of the system, the government introduced direct sales of coffee to operate alongside the auction system in the year 2006. The direct sales, commonly known as the second window, is meant to enable coffee growers export their coffee directly to the buyers based outside Kenya. Kenya Cooperative Coffee Exporters Limited was registered to be the sole marketer of coffee from the cooperative sector. This system is expected to minimize the players along the chain. We have some challenges. The marketing of agricultural products is critical in increasing agricultural productivity. But what did the government do to help the cooperative movement? The government created a Ministry of Cooperative Development and Marketing in charge of cooperative policies to facilitate cooperative registration and oversee their implementation. The ministry also provides cooperative advisory services, education and training, financing policy, savings, credit and banking services policy, including promotion of cooperative governance. The time is so short, but the ministry's mandate actually is to formulate, implement cooperative development policies, and facilitate cooperative registration and to oversee its enforcement. We have achieved a lot in this sector, just 1 minute, since 2004, because we have achieved various milestones, including a review of the Cooperative Societies Act and subsidiary legislations, enactment of the SACCO Bill, decentralization of the operations of the Cooperative Tribunal, improved governance in the cooperative movement, amalgamation of economically and viable cooperative societies, rehabilitation and upgrading of the Cooperative College of Kenya into a university, and enforcing improved compliance with the cooperative society. We have also facilitated the formation of cooperative alliance and ensured that there is now a regulatory authority to ensure that all the cooperative societies follow the laid down regulations. I think let me add there, then the rest can come as we discuss. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing the story of the difficulties of moving historically from a more state-controlled to a more liberalized form of cooperatives, and the steps that the government has taken to meet these new challenges. Now I would like to turn the floor over to a colleague, Florence Tartanac. She's the Senior Agro-Industries Officer of the Rural Infrastructure and Agro-Industries Division of FAO, and I believe she has a video to share with us.
Yes, thank you very much, Eve. I think the case I will present is a good example of what we can do in this changing environment in cooperatives, and in particular in Kenya. But as we already said, cooperatives play a crucial role in strengthening the collective bargaining power and equitable participation of smallholders in value chain. They are key for aggregating supply from small farmers, accessing finance and inputs on good terms, for disseminating good agriculture practices, and for providing a collective voice to the small farmers. A major role for cooperatives is also the intermediary function they plan in interfacing with buyers on behalf of the smallholders. Strengthening this role was the main objective of this FAO project, which seeks to link cooperatives and groups of small farmers to targeted buyers. This is what we call the inclusive business model approach, which focuses specifically on the smallholder buyer linkages through strengthening the cooperative capacities. FAO, in partnership with local governments and partners, has been in the forefront in implementing the inclusive business model approach, which has been piloted in 16 countries across Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific regions, with the support of the European Union. This quick start approach is easily customized to the local context and focuses on the weakest link between the smallholder and their organizations and the buyer, which could be a trader, a processor, or a retailer, helping to identify context and commodity-specific solutions to local market obstacles. The following video describes the activities and results of a case where the inclusive business model approach was implemented in Kenya in support to the cotton sector, focusing on building the commercial linkages between cotton cooperative and ginners. Implemented in the cotton growing districts of Siaya and Nambale, with the support of one local NGO called Farm Concern International, and activities involved working with 15 cooperatives representing 18,000 smallholders and 4 ginneries, from which 2 were also cooperatives. A key message from the video is that in order to strengthen the collective capacity of smallholders in a more equitable value chain, the public sector and partners also need to engage with the actual and potential buyers of smallholder produce. As a result of this approach, there was also an increased appreciation by the cooperative themselves of the need to work with their buyers, in this case the ginneries, rather than in opposition to them. So let's see the video and enjoy it.
60% of Kenya is cotton friendly. If almost all Kenyans can be encouraged to grow cotton.
In Kenya, the cotton industry is a major source of income for thousands of small-scale farmers, particularly those living in the arid and semi-arid areas. The crop is grown in Western, Nyanza, Rift Valley, Central, Eastern, and Coast provinces under rain-fed conditions.
Nilianza kupanda pamba 1987 na watoto wangu wote nasomesha na pamba.
Zile faida nimepata kwa pamba imenisaidia sana kwa sababu niliweza kununua hata ng'ombe yangu ya maziwa.
The country is estimated to have 200,000 smallholder cotton farmers, while cottage-level industries employ about 45,000 people. However, the role of cotton as a significant source of livelihood for communities in low-potential areas and a source of raw material for both the textile and the byproduct-based agro-industries has diminished over the years. Notwithstanding the numerous threats which plague the industry, Farm Concern International developed a business approach with technical support from FAO that enables a prioritization of interventions that strengthen the commercial relationship between actors in the sector, enabling them to tackle local-level issues for the improvement of the entire value chain. Farm Concern International, in collaboration with FAO, guided the implementation of the following activities. Farm Concern International, in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture and Cotton Development Authority and technical support from FAO, facilitated Jinner farmer meetings in each of the participating ginneries. The Farmer Jinner Business Forums created a platform for interaction between Jinners and farmers and Jinner and supplier representatives to forge partnerships, build trust, and move towards formalization of partnerships. During the cotton business model upgrading intervention, ginneries took a leading role in organizing interactive meetings with local cotton farmers to discuss issues of interest to the farmers.
Wakati tunawatisa kama hata kama ni mbegu, hata kama ni mandawa hiyo, ataleta wakati mimea wanalipa.
Kama yule ambaye anapima, anaweza kuwa anapima na ile daktari yake anapiga juu. Wakulima hataki kuona kama wananyanyaswa.
Kama ni chairman, kama ni treasurer, ama mchague mtu mmoja. Si ndio? Sekretari aangalie mizani. Kwa sababu sisi tuko kwa ofisi hatuwezi kujua maneno yote.
Watu wa jina wanataka kuja kutununulia pamba. Tuambiwe tarehe kamili. Tujije tukamaliza siku nyingi tukiwaongojea.
Unakuta jina lingine kama ni ya Mwea inanunua juu zaidi ya Meru. Ukienda Kitui inanunua juu zaidi ya ile. Na hapo ndio naona inatokea mvutano sasa katikati ya mkulima na jinale ambaye waliweka mikakati na ile roni walipewa.
Hatuna uwezo kabisa tukiwa sisi peke yetu kusema prices ama kusema bei ya pamba. Lazima tushirikiane na wengine kama vile mmesikia mataifa zingine wanapanda pamba. Tunakaa chini tunaona tuna compare those prices. Tunajua tutauza pamba aje hapa Kenya.
Capacity building on partnership development was done to educate both the farmers and ginners on the importance of partnership in business success.
Na hata wakati wa kunyunyizia tunanyunyizia wakati ambao ufai kwa sababu dawa imekosekana.
Pamba kwa mwaka mmoja nalimwa mara 5. Na hiyo ni nyingine maana pamba ukiwa vizuri lazima uipalilie mara 3 na mara 4. Na hiyo ni kalama.
Similar to the training for ginneries, Farm Concern International also developed 10 modules for building the capacity of staff of farmer organizations and cotton cooperatives. Over 100 cooperatives trainers were trained on business model approach, on various technical and management skills. The practical training has enhanced the capacity of cooperatives, ginneries, and enhanced trust between ginneries and producers. The cotton business model upgrading approach provides great opportunities to involve cotton cooperatives, smallholders, and ginners in the revitalization of the cotton industry in Kenya. The model is expected to significantly enhance the equitable participation of the cotton producers in the cotton value chain. Strategic partnerships and collaboration are critical drivers within the integrated business model that will put the cotton subsector in Kenya as a contributor to the achievement of Vision 2030 and the Millennium Development Goals.
Thank you very much for that excellent video. So now I have the pleasure to introduce our discussant. And we have with us today Ms. Atangana. She's has started off by creating grassroots organizations at the local level and eventually national level organizations of farmers, and then Pan-African Organization of Farmers. So she was the first president of the platform of the Pan-African Peasant Organization, and she has been on the advisory committee for the International Year of Cooperatives and has been nominated as FAO Special Ambassador for Cooperatives. So I'm delighted to welcome Ms. Atangana from Cameroon to respond to some of the things that you've heard today, give some comments and raise some questions to our speakers. Thank you.
Bonjour, Leur Excellence, Madame Velaria, chers délégués. Mon rôle était d'écouter les intervenants et de pouvoir donner mon point de vue de ce qui est ressorti de toutes ces interventions. Et à les écouter, ce que j'ai pu comprendre, c'est qu'effectivement, le monde a besoin des coopératives et les coopératives ont montré leur importance. Non seulement l'importance économique, mais aussi et surtout l'importance dans la création des liens sociaux. Et la création des liens sociaux, la protection environnementale et l'établissement de la dignité humaine. Mais j'ai aussi compris que ces coopératives sont diverses, elles sont transversales. Et pourquoi? C'est parce qu'elles répondent aux besoins des communautés. Elles sont l'initiative des communautés et elles tentent de répondre aux besoins posés par les communautés en termes de production, en termes de transformation des produits, en termes de distribution des produits agricoles et en termes de services, en termes de formation, de renforcement des capacités et de transfert des connaissances. Et ici, l'auto-organisation est de règles. Les gens s'organisent de manière autonome et mettent en place des règles propres à eux dans le respect des principes coopératifs, avec une culture de la démocratie. Mais j'ai également retenu que pour avancer, il faut un cadre juridique. Et là, les gouvernements sont fortement interpellés, c'est-à-dire qu'il faut créer un environnement favorable pour que les communautés arrivent à s'organiser de manière autonome, de manière indépendante, pour pouvoir mettre en place des coopératives performantes qui renforcent la productivité, qui renforcent l'animation sociale dans le village. Il faut donc des cadres juridiques et là, il faut tenir compte des circonscriptions territoriales parce qu'il faut aussi tenir compte de la culture, des traditions. Et l'adhésion ici est donc libre parce que les gens se mettent ensemble, parce qu'ils partagent les besoins communs, des problèmes communs et un engagement commun. J'ai souligné la problématique de la durabilité. La coopérative est un élément essentiel pour la préservation de l'environnement. Et dans la gouvernance, on a souligné la démocratie également. Mais il faut dire que la coopérative est un élément d'inclusion. Elle éloigne la marginalisation. Elle est un élément qui permet de faire plus et mieux. Parce que pauvre, seul on ne peut rien. L'union fait la force. Et c'est grâce à cette union qu'on arrive à la productivité, qu'on arrive à mieux négocier avec les plus forts et qu'on arrive véritablement à l'efficience et à l'efficacité. Donc il faut faire plus, il faut faire mieux, notamment en ce qui concerne la sécurité et la souveraineté alimentaire. Et aussi, les coopératives participent à la stabilité sociale et j'ajouterai à la stabilité politique. Maintenant, j'ai quand même quelques questions à poser. Ma première question à tout le panel, c'est comment est-ce que dans toutes ces initiatives, nous pouvons avoir des éléments clés qui permettent l'autonomisation des femmes. Parce que les femmes, pour nous, sont essentielles. Les jeunes également, le développement des emplois. Quelles sont les innovations qui ont été vraiment retenues par les différents intervenants pour accroître l'autonomie des femmes que nous recherchons aujourd'hui et dont le FIDA, la FAO et le PAM ont lancé un programme. Comment pouvons-nous arriver à cette autonomisation? Et comment pouvons-nous réussir à respecter l'indépendance des coopératives? Parce que dans la plupart de nos pays, nous voyons une interférence avec la politique. Comment faire pour que ces coopératives soient autonomes, qu'elles évoluent de manière indépendante, qu'elles soient véritablement reconnues comme des partenaires? Merci.
Excellent. So those are two very tough questions. And before we open it up to the floor, let's see what our panelists have to say about this. So the first one was, what are the real innovations to empower women? We're here talking about a paradigm shift to a more inclusive social and economic system, and we have been showing how, from the cotton case and some of the other cases, that small producers are able to engage. So we see that form of inclusion. But what about the gender question, or what about women's inclusion? I know from gender work we've done, we often see that as organizations grow and become more powerful, women's participation in leadership often becomes less evident. So what do our speakers today have to suggest on that front? Please, Florence.
Yes, actually one of the results of in this the particular case of Kenya, it was not that women stepped down, but on the contrary, there was more participation of women in this particular case, but in other cases, as women are most of the time involved in processing activities, food processing, so they are key partners and they are key in the value chain process. We have another case with the same approach in West Africa, when women are processing rice, and they are even recognized now our key partner and a key element of the chain, not only because they are processing, but also because they are now negotiating with the producers and with the market, and they are being the intermediaries in this process.
That's an example where, by focusing on the kind of process along the chain that is a process in which women have an important role, we can ensure that we're also empowering women as we support cooperatives. Do we have any other examples? Has this been a challenge for any of you? In the cooperative movement in Kenya or in France, Are we seeing women participate equally as participants and as leaders? Or do we see it vary across the different types of sectors in which cooperatives operate? For Kenya.
Thank you so much. As we have heard about cooperative is mostly in the rural areas and mostly in the agricultural sector. And who are the majority in the agricultural sector? They are the women. So most of the women now, as she has said, are so involved in this cooperative, and many of them now have started taking leadership roles in the cooperative societies. Most of them now are undergoing training on how to manage even the finances in some of these cooperative societies. So in a way, women are not just being empowered financially, but also in leadership, because so that they can make decisions that affect their individual cooperative societies. So we are seeing that women now are no longer the women that are just there being told what to do, but now they are taking the bull by the horns and they are making decisions that affect the cooperative societies, also affect even their families, because with empowerment they are getting new finances, they are getting loans from some of these cooperative societies, and they are making a difference, not just in their lives, but the lives also of their families. We are seeing women also being trained in issues of nutrition through this cooperative. So we are seeing now a shared society, not that those times that people are being told the women is just there, but we are seeing something totally different. And we can say that cooperative has really come up to empower women, and through this leadership in cooperative, we are seeing them now advancing even to the political arena. And that's why now you are having women getting involved in the political aspect in most of our countries. Thank you.
So cooperatives as an instrument for social and political change as well, beyond the economic. What about in France?
Alors en France, il y a une situation un peu différente qu'au Kenya, c'est-à-dire que jusqu'ici, la profession agricole est majoritairement masculine. Ceci dit, on constate que dans les nouvelles générations, il y a une hausse quand même de l'installation des jeunes femmes, notamment avec tous les mouvements d'agriculture de proximité ou d'agriculture bio. Au sein des coopératives, il y a une action forte qui est menée, qui vise à la formation des administrateurs dont peuvent bénéficier les femmes. Ça va être un axe fort de progrès porté par COP de France. Et à titre d'exemple, je citerai le fait qu'il y a une très grande coopérative, Nicolas Feuillat, qui est une coopérative de Champagne française, qui est leader sur le marché, dont la présidente vient d'être élue, une femme très dynamique, qui est vraiment une coopératrice convaincue. Donc ça montre que les choses avancent dans le bon sens.
Again, this shows a bit the diversity, the geographical diversity, and the way that different historical cultures relating with agriculture influence the cooperative movement as well. So now what about the second question that Ms. Atangana posed about respecting the independence of cooperatives? How do we ensure that they're independent? And I would just draw your attention, there was a declaration that was launched yesterday called the Dunsany Declaration for Rural Cooperative Development, and it was launched on World Food Day. And one of the things they're saying is that they're making a call to governments to ensure that, what is the word? Oh, yes. Calling for standalone cooperative legislation that is empowering and not prescriptive where it doesn't exist. So why is standalone legislation important, and how do we go about actually respecting the independence of cooperatives? And is this so important? I mean, we heard a little bit the case from Kenya of a move from a very dependent cooperative sector on government to a more independent one. So how important today is this independence? Again, I'll turn it over to any of the speakers. Florence?
Yes, actually from the business point of view of cooperative, of side of cooperative, we always try to have the public policy being conducive and enabling environment, and not to have direct action or direct implementation rules. So in this case we have to reform sometimes abolish other bureaucratic rules that are governing institutional, legal, administrative frameworks, both for private sector but also in most of a lot of countries for cooperatives. So we think that this is contributing to a general ease of doing business, but is also benefiting cooperatives, because cooperatives have to compete with others that are in the same environment.
France, and then I'm going to turn it over to the floor. Or do you have something to say? Or?
Oui, pour la France, j'insisterai peut-être sur 2 points par rapport à l'indépendance. Tout d'abord, l'axe fort, c'est le respect de la gouvernance. Si on respecte le principe un homme, une voix via l'Assemblée générale, ce sont bien les adhérents, donc les agriculteurs qui sont sociétaires de leur coopérative, qui conservent le pouvoir et définissent la stratégie de leur entreprise. Donc premier axe, la gouvernance. Deuxième axe, c'est quand même la politique, je l'ai cité tout à l'heure rapidement, mise en place par les pouvoirs publics. Et donc là, je reviens sur le Haut Conseil de la coopération agricole, qui a été créé par la loi d'orientation agricole de 2006 en France, qui est un organisme, un établissement public doté de la personnalité morale et qui donne l'agrément aux coopératives et donc contrôle si les coopératives respectent en fait les règles et les principes de la coopération agricole. Donc c'est quand même un contrôle extérieur d'indépendance qui est important et qui a été porté par les pouvoirs publics.
Turning it over.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, the government normally is supposed to be providing the policy guidelines, not to interfere directly. If you take an example of Kenya, in 2008 we have enacted the Circle Societies Act, which now we have now a completely independent regulatory authority that looks into the affairs of the cooperative. And again, we also have something now we call the Ethics Commission for Cooperative Societies, which has been established last year through the Public Officer Ethics Act, to ensure that even if you have board of governors in a cooperative society, they don't just take the members for granted. And so that's why now the government does not want to be involved. It wants to be independent because, as I said, from the year 2004, the government tended to pull out from the cooperative societies. So all the government, through the Ministry of Cooperative Development, is doing is to ensure that the bills and the policies that government passes are implemented to the dot by the cooperative societies, to ensure that the members get the worth of their contributions or whatever they intend the cooperative societies to give the members.
Thanks. Out into the audience. I see someone over there in the corner named John Rouse, who used to be, for 20 years, I think, with FAO, working on cooperatives and producers organizations. I'm going to collect some names, and I have somebody going around to collect the names of who wants to speak. But to start us off, John, you've been responsible for some kind of e-consultation for the Food Security and Nutrition Forum, on the subject of inclusive cooperatives and enabling environments for cooperatives. Can you tell us a little bit about what the conclusions of that discussion were as we go around collecting the names of some of the people who want to speak?
Yeah, sure. The topic of the discussion, which was held in August, not the greatest time to do one of these discussions, but we had a surprisingly good turnout. The topic was on enabling rural cooperatives and producer organizations to thrive as sustainable business organizations. So the emphasis on the discussions was how do you create the conditions for developing sustainable business cooperatives that have a business orientation, an enterprise orientation. And the discussions centered around some of the main constraints that many cooperatives face in developing countries. One of which is a lack of support for bottom-up approaches to cooperative development. By bottom-up, we mean when you think of creating larger group collective organizations, you don't start with the big group. You start with smaller groups, and use that as a building block for building larger organizations. And you focus on a bottom-up approach, which means essentially giving more say to the individual member of the society rather than to the directors and the leadership. A second constraint is the over-reliance on external support, and this was mentioned a couple of times in the discussions today. And I think this really gets to the heart of a lot of issues that seem to address this whole point on autonomy, independence of the cooperative movement. And I think the general feeling was that there is too much external support, in the sense, let's say, too much external support that does not take in consideration the long-term objective of creating financially sustainable and self-reliant cooperative or group organizations. And this is absolutely essential. If we're talking of independence, you cannot be independent if you essentially depend too much financially on external players or donors or government or what have you. I think it also relates to the whole key issue of savings mobilization in developing countries and the capitalization of the cooperative organizations themselves. If the members of these organizations don't feel like they're investors or stakeholders with a financial stake in the organization, they're not going to take good care of it. They're not going to make sure that they elect leaders that are responsible, that address their needs. And I think this is another issue that was brought out. The lack of business training. It's not just the cooperative managers that need to learn how to run a business, it's also the individual members themselves. That basic sort of business skills, how to keep a budget, how to manage your family affairs, how to save money, that you earn from the cooperative, how to accumulate that savings. These are also important. One other issue that was brought out in the discussions was the use of the new information and communications technology, ICT, to empower the individual members, the managers themselves, in a way that could never be done before. I mean, the mobile telephone, the laptop computer, the iPad, the tablet, these are incredibly empowering tools. They allow a person in an isolated village to pick up a telephone and theoretically call the minister and say, look, I'm very upset about this. And I think this whole issue of how can FAO, how can member countries use this new technology to empower rural people to play a more important role in running their businesses, in dialoguing with government, in trying to solve problems, is very important. In terms of recommendations that came out of the discussions, one was, I think, that there should be more case studies on successful cooperatives. There's an old saying that seeing is believing. If you can't show people what a successful cooperative is in very concrete terms, they're not going to believe you. And I think it is important to show what does a financially self-sufficient, independent cooperative look like? What sort of policies, what sort of mechanisms do they have that make them successful? Other points was, okay, in terms of external support, if you're giving external financial support to the cooperative sector, tie it to some kind of a link with financial self-sufficiency and self-reliance of the organization itself. If they don't reach those objectives, then you should stop providing support. ICT technology, use it as best you can. In terms of proposals for FAO, one proposal that was proposed, and I hate to admit it, I think that I was one of the facilitators, I proposed it, but I think others, agreed, that there is a need within FAO to create a technical unit which can respond more effectively to problems that cooperatives face and governments face in promoting cooperatives in member countries. There's also a need, I think, to do a stock taking of what FAO has done in the past, what works and what doesn't work. One thing that has worked, I think, and maybe will be discussed later today, is a very interesting experiment that FAO had in using ICT technology in Kenya, matter of fact, with dairy cooperatives. And there is someone here in the audience that I think can fill you in on that. I think that's about it. But I think it was a very useful discussion, and I hope that some of the issues that were raised in it will be brought up today. One final point is that there is a brief that sort of summarizes the outcome of these discussions. It's available in English, French, and Spanish, and it's outside the door. Thank you.
Great. Wow. That were some very, very challenging questions that I'm sure refer not just to cooperatives, but to the viability of any rural institution. So I really encourage us all to grab a copy of that as we leave. Now, from the audience, there's Paulo Gouveia from COPAC, who would like to raise some issues.
Thank you. Indeed. COPA, just to indicate briefly, COPA represents the European farmers and COGECA represents EU cooperatives. And in this respect, and COP de France is one of our 32 national member organizations, and globally in the EU we have 38,000 cooperatives which have a global turnover of some 360 billion euros and employ some 660,000 people. So this means that there are different levels of development of cooperatives throughout Europe and throughout the world, and I certainly don't want to compare the level of development of some of the top leading cooperatives in Europe with some others in Africa or in other places of the world. But I would like to focus my comment here on the issue of independence. And cooperatives, one thing that we have to keep in mind is cooperatives are businesses owned and controlled and for the benefit of their members, which are the farmers. And this is the starting point. As businesses, they need to be profitable. And they are to operate in a market economy, and for that they need to have also a level playing field, meaning that they need to play by the same rules as any other type of business that we usually call, in terms of agroeconomics, investor-owned firms. They need to be on a level playing field and not being biased either pro or against. In this respect, and especially looking at the agricultural sector, what is important is that governments, they define what are the policies that need to be put in place to promote the sector. And then for the rest, let the farmers organize themselves through cooperatives, because cooperatives will be the instrument for farmers to have a better positioning on the food chain. And I'm not even going to enter into this delicate issue of the functioning of the chain, because then we could stay here for weeks. Or if not months. But this is really the issue at stake. We have in Europe, of course, very big cooperatives. The biggest cooperative that we have in Europe is Friesland Campina, with a turnover of basically 10 billion euros. But we also have very small cooperatives. And this is important. We need to mix. Everyone finds their own place in the market depending on the strategy and what they are producing. Thank you.
So really underlining the importance of the level playing field and that cooperatives be profitable in a market economy. And I should just mention that in the financial crisis, one of the things we found was that cooperatives actually fared better than many other enterprises because their members, the cooperatives were working both for profit as well as for the long-term interests of their members. So they weren't just speculating. They were much more regulated, self-regulated in terms of what their investments were. The second person I'd like to turn to is Ken Davies of the World Food Programme, and I suspect he might be able to share an example, a good case, perhaps.
Thank you, Eve. Yeah, I'm with the World Food Programme, and I represent an initiative that's called Purchase for Progress, or P4P, where we're trying to combine the capacity development, such as what John was talking about, with demand for staple food crops, cereals and pulses, basically, because we buy now about 1.25 billion US dollars worth of staple crops every year, most of it, about 85%, in developing countries, and we use that in the WFP food assistance programs. So we're working with about 1,000 farmers cooperatives with over 1 million members, and membership's about half women, but membership doesn't equal empowerment, which is something we're working on. And we're working with various scales of co-ops, from rural producers organizations right up to very large cooperative unions in Ethiopia that have got tens of thousands of members each. And we're doing this in 20 countries, in Africa and in Central America. And our goal is, if we could procure 10 to 20% of that $1.25 billion every year from farmers cooperatives, that would be $100 to $200 million more directly in the pockets of smallholder farmers in Africa and Central America. And we're working with more than 200 different partners in that effort, notably FAO and IFAD, among many NGOs and many indigenous NGOs. And in Africa, I have 3 points and questions for the panel. And I'm referring specifically to Africa here. One is, we actually have problem finding enough partners who work with farmers that have dirt under their fingernails. We have lots of donors, but in terms of groups like Farm Concern Africa that actually work on the ground with farmers, there are not nearly enough. That's one. What can we do about that? Second is credit. We have been banging our heads against the walls for 4 years trying to help farmers cooperatives find lines of affordable. There is credit, but it's unaffordable to find lines of affordable credit, because the banks are so risk averse for farming that even when we get loan guarantees from USAID, from IFC, for banks, they still are risk averse to loaning to farmers cooperatives. And the third, which links to that risk averseness for credit, is crop insurance. And now, crop insurance is a great idea, but it's not widely available. So how could we scale up and really make crop insurance available for smallholder farmers and smallholder farmer cooperatives? So I'd love to hear suggestions on how to address those 3 issues, and perhaps ICA or COPAC might assist us in trying to crack those 3 huge challenges. Thank you, Eve.
Excellent. That's a great challenge. We want to be winding up at 12:15, and we want 2:15, and we want to be able to give the panelists a chance to respond. And we want to have a few minutes at the end of some closing remarks from our colleague from ILO. So what I would ask is for each of the following people that as I call on you, to introduce yourself and to say what you need to say in 1 minute, and otherwise I won't be able to get you all. So with that, Ansel, Marstad, More and Better Network, please.
Yeah, my name is Axel Närstad. I'm a international co-coordinator of the More and Better Network, together with Elisabeth Tatangana. My question is, if you have any experience, I would be interested in investments in cooperatives and small and medium-sized enterprises as a whole. We are working with the Norwegian investment fund Norfund, established by the Norwegian government to contribute to development on soft business terms. And we find very little experiences, even if FAO has a lot of good evaluation of investment fund agriculture, to more models of investments for investors with cooperatives and small and medium-sized businesses. So if anyone have experiences on that, I would be very interested. Thank you.
One is Wim Polman, please. And please introduce yourself, too.
Yes, I'm Wim Polman. I worked 28 years in FAO for rural organizations, cooperatives included, and women in cooperatives included particular. I am in a unique position. I represent Latin America, an NGO for 5 Andean countries, which is aiming at helping farmers, small farmers, to keep their traditions and culture intact, and at the same time work for rural agro-industry development, and having also special focus on youth and women. This is my new role after 1 year retirement, and I love to work on this as a volunteer and support this development for this NGO in the mountains of the Andean countries, which are often isolated and where the women and the farmers in general are working under extreme climate conditions and lacking of resources. My past was 13 years in Asia, working with large-scale Asian cooperative networks. And particular to the ambassador, Mrs. Atangana, I would like to respond that on women in cooperatives, there is an Asian cooperative on women who focuses on leadership training and on business development. It's called the Asian Women Cooperative Forum. They were very closely linked to FAO until I had to retire, because there is no structure in FAO following up on my work. The other Asian network, which organizes 13 countries, cooperatives, movements and governments on policy, on technical assistance, it's called NADAC, the Network for Cooperative Development for Asia. These 2 networks are still existing, but no link with FAO anymore. Broken linkages. Broken linkages also within FAO, because FAO is responsible for 32 commodities. It takes care of 32 commodities from all aspects. And in many of these 32 commodities, there are cooperative sectors very important for food and for agro-industrial production. Each commodity line should have a cooperative profile. It is not happening, a broken linkage. And so I agree with Mr. Raus in his 2 recommendations. We need a proper technical unit for cooperative development as existed in the past but was dissolved, and we need stock taking in FAO to relink with these organizations. Thank you very much.
So there seems to be an emerging consensus, at least from some. Please, there's another person raising their hand. But please try to keep it to 1 minute so we can be inclusive. I'd like to ask Marlene Ramirez from Asia DIRA, please.
Thank you, Eve. I speak as a member of the World Consultative Committee of the CSO, who campaigned for the successfully launched and UNGA-sanctioned International Year of Family Farming in 2014. I think it is providential that the International Year of Cooperatives precedes the IYFF. My question is how to build on the IYC gains and activities to make the IYFF even more resounding. I think we should capitalize on the policy gains that may have been achieved the past years. Finally, I wish to point out that some of the recommendations mentioned, in particular the need for governments to provide enabling laws and legal framework to support the formation and strengthening of cooperatives, producers groups as cooperatives, should be strongly have been strongly presented in 2 recent events in the region, in particular the second ASEAN public-private sector dialogue, where the cooperatives and farmers groups, producers groups are part of the private sector, and the October 1 to 2 high-level consultation on policies to respond to high food prices in the Asia-Pacific region, which was organized by FAO, ADB, and IFAD. So these are information that to share to people that there are related events taking place at the sub-regional level. And if I may have 2 seconds, I think the all-women panel that we have now resonates the reality in many countries, in particular in my own country, where majority of the successful primary cooperatives are actually either led or managed by women cooperators. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move now, and this link between the International Year of Cooperatives and the International Year of Family Farming is something where there seems to be some really obvious need for building from one period to the next. Let me call on Mauvilain-Guillot from Agricultural, please.
Bonjour, donc effectivement je suis directeur d'Agropole, qui est une association qui vise à promouvoir à l'international les filières et l'organisation de la filière oléoprotéagineuse française. Je souhaitais simplement rebondir sur une demande qui avait été formulée tout à l'heure comme demandant des exemples d'organisations de producteurs qui étaient performantes et qui pouvaient être montrées en termes de succès. Et je pense que cette filière qui a été créée, qui est portée par des producteurs français, est un exemple que l'on peut citer et mettre en avant pour démontrer justement la pertinence de ces organisations. Tant sous le modèle que l'on peut connaître au nord, mais également au sud, puisque on essaye avec la FAO de travailler à la promotion de ces modèles.
Very much. Next, Mustafa Haruna, please. Or Harina from FAO.
Yeah. Mustafa Haruna here at the FAO. I work on the OEKR, where we have this project to deploy proven technologies to support farmers in the field. My question is very simple and very specific to the presentations from France and Kenya, and it also borders on the independence and autonomy of cooperatives. How, in these two cases, is the independence or autonomy of cooperatives ensured or guaranteed when you have public regulatory bodies at the top?
A question from the floor comes from our chair of the FAO Council, Luc Gouillot, please.
Merci, juste en 1 minute pour faire part à la fois mon expérience d'agriculteur, d'ancien responsable et ce que je vis à la FAO dans le cadre de la gouvernance aujourd'hui, pour rappeler 2 ou 3 choses fondamentales. N'oublions pas qu'on ne crée pas, on n'invente pas la coopération, elle était quand même dans les villages avec la collaboration villageoise. Il faut souvent la moderniser et la changer pour l'adapter aux nouvelles situations. Redire aussi que c'est quand même la base de 3 thèmes importants pour l'avenir de l'agriculture: l'initiative, la responsabilité et la solidarité. Et que je pense que notre rôle à la FAO, mais aussi les responsables du gouvernement, à chaque fois qu'il y a un dossier de développement qui se met dans un département, avant de le mettre en place, c'est qu'on se gratte la tête et qu'on s'assure qu'il n'y a pas un relais indispensable sur le terrain pour assurer cela. Parce que si on fait du développement en oubliant les acteurs de terrain, on aura toujours des difficultés. Puis dernière remarque qui a été évoquée à plusieurs reprises tout à l'heure, c'est qu'il faut aussi accompagner en permanence les agriculteurs et les agricultrices par la formation, parce que c'est la seule façon de la durabilité d'une part, mais aussi de la responsabilité et de l'indépendance. Et je termine, c'est que nous avons un nouveau deal à passer pour les années qui viennent, lorsqu'il y aura 70% des populations qui sont dans les villes. Ne laissons pas à d'autres le soin d'assurer la valeur ajoutée, c'est-à-dire organisons les producteurs par petites ou moyennes entreprises coopératives bien souvent pour pouvoir essayer de capter cette valeur ajoutée qui, y compris dans les pays occidentaux, nous a été bien souvent confisquée. Merci.
Okay, so we have some interesting challenges here that have been put before the panel. I think I'll start on this end and work down, and please, you can choose the set of questions that you want, but I'm going to make sure you try to answer each of them among all of you. So please, Florent.
Yes, thank you. Well, difficult to answer all the questions. Maybe I will focus on the one I can answer as looking at the business side of cooperative and their profitability. So there was one question about from WFP about the existence or lack of service providers at local level for giving services for cooperatives, and we face exactly the same problem when we implement, in particular, this project, but all others also. And what we are doing is trying to strengthen the capacity of this service provider, and we are not doing it directly from FAO to the cooperative, but through service providers. So the service provider will remain after we are out or after the project is finished, and they will be able to continue with the work. For example, in this case of cotton, the NGO, the local NGO is now empowered to continue with this work in the country. The credit is also a big issue. We are working on it. We have one unit working on credit and new forms of credit. Our new way of involving new services for credit could be totally invented from because the world is changing and there is a lot of things changing. In this particular case of Kenya, one of the better results of the project that one local service provider was able to give a specific credit for shortening the delay between the payment to farmers. It was really key for having this strengthening this link between the farmers and the GINers, because it was a long-standing issue, the long time between the farmers were giving the product and the payment, and we were able to solve this problem with other stakeholders in the chain. I think it's very important to having this stock-taking exercise within FAO, but also with other institutions that about successful experiences. There is a lot of cooperatives that are very successful experiences, and they are quite good in doing the business, but also to give the benefits of this successful business to the members, and I think we need to improve this. We are doing a lot, but in FAO we are not so good to explain or to present what we are doing, and the visibility of our work is sometimes missing. And also I totally agree that we need more training, capacity building of cooperatives, service providers, and trying to go up in the value chain and to add value at each stage of the chain. Thank you.
Okay, Your Excellency, please.
Thank you so much. I'll answer the question on the issue of the government getting involved. Kenya, we have learned a lesson because, as I said earlier, we had cooperative societies that were started, but they didn't have any structural, framework. And so what happened is that after some time, the cooperative societies went down, and what happened is it benefited especially the leaders at the top before we realized what was happening. Recently we had something we were calling in Kenya pyramid scheme, where people get around and you get money and you have to give partners. Before we realized, some people became millionaires at the expense of some individuals. So many of the people now turn to the government for reimbursement, and the government was not involved. That's why the government now has put in place some regulations, because when the cooperative starts, it starts from the grassroots. Some of them don't even know how to handle the banking. You start having funds and you put it in your house, and then you have to be taught what to do or how to go about the banking. So people are being taught now that if you want to form a sort of a group or a cooperative society, these are the requirements. You need a board, you need some members, you need the leadership, and then you need a bank so that the money of the members is safe. So the government does not want to control as such, but it wants just to guide. It is serving as guidelines on what needs to be done, so that not everybody just wakes up in the morning and forms a cooperative society, gets all these members, and then in the final analysis, the end product is not what the members expected. So on the issue of credit, we have got the Cooperative Bank of Kenya, which is one of the largest bank of cooperative in Africa, which is trying its best. I know the rates are sometimes higher, but they are trying. And also we have got something we are calling the Cooperative Insurance Cooperative Scheme, which is trying to insure even the farmers' products, so that sometimes when the farm products are affected by the climate changes, at least the farmers get some compensation. So this is something that the government has introduced. So on the credit, some of the international fund, like the IFAD, has gotten in partnership with one of our bank, Equity Bank, where the funds are given to the bank, and the farmers now can access the loans with very little, very less rates through the Equity Bank for them to enhance their agricultural investments. So, yeah.
Okay, I think that's thank you. Thank you. Thank you, please.
Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais faire un commentaire sur la question concernant les assurances et le financement. En effet, l'Afrique a encore besoin de mettre en place le cadre, la loi d'orientation ou bien une politique agricole qui prenne en compte, qui intègre tous les leviers qui peuvent permettre également de créer un environnement incitatif pour le développement des coopératives. Et ce levier doit prendre en compte les questions d'organisation, les questions de financement adéquat, les questions d'infrastructure, les questions d'équipement et les questions de formation. Nous avons par exemple un centre de formation qui forme techniquement, mais qui doit également former les femmes dans le leadership. Mais il faut trouver des ressources pour cela, parce que les paysans n'ont pas suffisamment d'épargne pour payer leur formation. Donc tout cela exige vraiment une politique qui prenne en compte de manière globale les besoins des communautés. Et c'est là qu'il est important qu'il y ait le dialogue entre les populations, le gouvernement et les institutions pour mettre en place peut-être des fonds spécifiques pour accompagner les populations à s'approprier le système des coopératives. Et je voudrais vraiment insister sur les fonds spéciaux, notamment pour les femmes. Les femmes n'ont pas beaucoup accès aux ressources et il est vraiment important qu'on développe des fonds spécifiques pour accompagner les femmes à leur autonomisation. Merci.
And finally from our panel, Barbara, please.
Oui, je vais revenir rapidement peut-être sur les questions de financement justement qui sont liées aussi à l'indépendance. Juste par un rappel historique, c'est qu'en France, la coopération agricole s'est structurée à partir de la fin du 19e siècle, en même temps que sont apparues les caisses d'assurance et de mutualité agricole. Donc ça a été un mouvement conjoint qui a permis aux coopératives agricoles de se développer et d'être indépendantes financièrement. Donc je crois que c'est important de l'avoir en tête. Et ensuite, pour terminer, je voudrais appuyer ce que nous a dit le directeur du COPAC OGK et Mauvilain-Guillot pour bien rappeler que les entreprises coopératives agricoles sont des entreprises, ce ne sont pas des associations, qu'elles sont sur le marché, leurs sociétaires sont des agriculteurs, donc des acteurs de terrain. Et comme je disais tout à l'heure, c'est la bonne gouvernance qui est le gage de l'indépendance des coopératives.
So, the final speaker will be our guest from ILO, Simel Eşim from Turkey. She's the chief of the ILO cooperative branch, a political economist, and has worked previously in the regional office of the Arab states and in the International Center for Research on Women, the World Bank, and numerous other places. Just before I turn over the floor to you, I do want to mention that outside you'll find two very interesting briefs, one on cooperatives in the fisheries sector that was presented at the Committee for Fisheries, and another on the role of cooperatives in food losses. And we keep on talking, we're here today to talk about fighting hunger. Reducing food losses is one of the critical ways of doing this. This is not a small sector. It's $1.1 trillion of turnover by the 300 largest cooperatives alone. That's equivalent to the 10th largest economy of the world, Canada, and it's 1 billion members. It's a lot. So let me just turn it over to Simel.
Thank you, Eve. Very interesting issues around enabling environment. I'll just mention a few. Good governance came up, entrepreneurial culture, trade and sustainable economic integration, enabling legal and regulatory environment, fair competition, access to financial services, information communication technology, education training. What we did not hear was the importance of peace, political stability, sound, stable macroeconomic policies, because when we talk about food security, it's not just agricultural policies, it's also trade policies, and the importance of policy coherence and coordination. You may have the perfectest cooperative legislation on the planet, and if you do not have proper, it's not in cooperative model is not integrated or excluded from tax legislation, is not linked to agricultural policy or labor legislation, then it doesn't work. With respect to governance, I think these new, more independent, free, membership service oriented co-ops going back to their principles is happening now. It's happening around the globe. And this is something to watch out for and support. And these cooperatives also are being challenged in this year, International Year. They responded to the crisis well, okay, because they were connected to the local economy in most cases. Those that got very big, not always, especially in the financial sector. But what's important, I think, is co-ops to become better advocates for themselves. And I think as UN agencies, international cooperative movement, and other stakeholders, we have a role to play in helping in this co-op advocacy, in getting the word out to the governments, local and national, to the public. I want to also mention this point about business, social. We did not have co-ops in the MDGs. We did not, a lot of the MDG indicators are not going to be achieved by 2015. In the post-2015 framework, sustainable development will be an overarching issue. And economic growth, as we know it, at the enterprise level as well as national levels, is not sustainable with the existing resources we have and the social and environmental implications of all business, including cooperative business, has to be taken into account. So the cooperatives also need to reflect on this social and economic impact. We are quite weak on co-op data. We keep referring to some of the co-op movement numbers. With all due respect to co-op movements, we need better surveys, household establishment surveys. Administrative data is not good because there's a lot of fake co-ops, non-active co-ops, etc. in there. As UN and as COPAC, we do have draft international plan for action on cooperatives for 2012 and beyond. Actually, the International Cooperative Alliance is calling for a 10-year, a decade on co-ops, launching from that year. It may not turn into a UN decade, it probably won't, but this is the co-op movement taking action. Last week in Quebec, 3,000 cooperatives came together for a declaration to take, because financial regulations are changing. A lot of financial co-ops that were not a part of the problem are going to be a part of taking on the transaction costs that are going to be imposed on them. They need to be better advocates. We can help them at the global, regional, national level through our joint programming at the national level, but also regional conferences, research, our work on statistics, etc. And we already have joint products as FAO, ILO. So it's hopeful.
So on behalf of FAO, I'd like to thank all of our panelists. Let me just mention that I have a deep regret that I was not able to call on our colleague from the International Cooperative Alliance, who's here. But the good news is that we're all going over to lunch in the D bar, and we can hear from him there. So we have to leave something still for the appetite, right? And as they say in Japan, a single arrow is easily broken, but not 10 in a bundle. So let us hope that cooperative action will move forward, as seems to be the case from this International Year. Thank you very much. Escorted over to the D room for lunch for all of you who'd like to join us.